All these cards are maxed out, Miss Carter, and they're all in your name. The bank representative's voice was calm, almost gentle, but nothing could soften the blow of those words. She slid the statements across the desk, each one stamped with glaring red figures. There must be some mistake, I stammered, my hands trembling as I flipped through the pages. I only have one credit card, and I barely use it. The representative sighed, tilting her computer screen toward me. According to our records, your husband added you as an authorized user on these accounts. Your signatures are on all the applications. She pointed to the digital forms, and there they were, signatures that looked eerily like mine, but just different enough to SE. I never signed these, I never even saw these cards. Her expression shifted from sympathy to concern. Miss Carter, the total outstanding balance on these 5 accounts is $52,806.30, and they're all 3 months past due. I sat there frozen, struggling to process the words. Just 5 days ago, my husband of 14 years had packed a single suitcase, kissed our son goodbye while I was at work, and left. I've found someone who truly understands me. Don't try to reach me, I'll be in touch about the divorce. And now, as the bank representative listed my limited options, debt consolidation, payment plans, possible bankruptcy, the full weight of Eric's betrayal came crashing down. He hadn't just walked away from our marriage. He had sabotaged me. Financially, completely, and deliberately. My name is Naomi Carter, and I'm 42 years old. I work as a paralegal in a small law firm in Charleston, South Carolina. I met Eric when I was 24. He was charming, confident, and made me feel safe in a way I never had before. I grew up in foster care, bouncing from home to home, craving security and belonging. When Eric proposed after just a year of dating, I said yes without hesitation. He had a plan for our future, climbing the corporate ladder, buying a house, raising a family. I believed in him. I trusted him. But somewhere along the way, his protectiveness turned into something else. He controlled our money, insisting I didn't need to stress about finances. He gave me a monthly allowance for household expenses, refused to add my name to our joint accounts, and called me irresponsible when I asked to be more involved. I should have seen the signs. But love and fear have a way of making you blind. Now, here I was, left with a mountain of debt in my name and a son, Ethan, who had already endured enough upheaval. The thought of losing our home, of disrupting his life even more, made my stomach twist. As I drove home from the bank, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Naomi, this is Lisa. Eric told me you were controlling and financially abusive, but I'm starting to see things differently. Call me if you want to know what he's been hiding. Lisa, the name Eric had mumbled in his sleep months ago. The name I had dismissed as nothing. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Whatever Eric had been hiding, I had a sickening feeling that the debt was just the beginning. Naomi, you're overthinking things again. That's what Eric used to say whenever I voiced concerns about his growing control over our lives. At first, it was subtle, suggesting certain friends were negative influences, implying my mother's frequent calls were too intrusive. When I mentioned returning to school, he'd remind me how important my role at home was to Ethan's development. You don't want our son raised by strangers, do you? He'd ask whenever I brought up childcare options. Besides, he'd argue, the cost of tuition and daycare would be a waste when I was already doing what mattered most, being a good mother. I believed him because I wanted to. Because the alternative meant admitting that my safe harbor had become a cage. So I adapted. I focused on Ethan, worked part-time when Eric deemed it acceptable, and gradually lost touch with the friends and family members who asked too many questions about our increasingly isolated life. There had been warning signs, of course. The unexplained late nights at work. The second phone, for client emergencies only, protected by a password he refused to share. The way he'd quickly minimize his computer screen when I entered his office. The growing emotional distance despite his continued control over nearly every aspect of our lives. 2 years ago, I found a receipt from an expensive Charleston restaurant for a night he'd claimed to be working late. When I confronted him, Eric turned the situation around so skillfully that I ended up apologizing for doubting him. I was planning a surprise anniversary dinner, he had said, his expression wounded. I was scouting locations, and now you've ruined it. Why can't you just trust me, Naomi? I never saw that anniversary dinner. Instead, I received a bracelet in a plain brown box, ordered online with no note. But I convinced myself it was my fault, that my suspicion had ruined whatever grand plans he might have had. So I worked harder to be the wife and mother he wanted, silencing the small voice inside me that whispered something was wrong. Even now, with 5 maxed-out credit cards in my name and a goodbye note on the counter, part of me wondered if there was something I could have done differently to prevent this. I didn't call the number from the text right away. Instead, I picked Ethan up from school, forcing a smile as he chatted about his day. How do you tell your 13-year-old that his father has not only left, but has potentially ruined your financial future? That the home he's grown up in might not be as much longer? While Ethan did his homework, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, calculating numbers that refused to balance. My part-time job brought in about $1,800 a month. Our mortgage alone was $1,400. Then there were utilities, groceries, Ethan's school activities. No matter how many ways I reworked the figures, it wasn't enough. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lisa. I understand if you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But Eric has been lying to both of us. I can prove it. Almost against my will, I found myself dialing the number. The voice on the other end was younger than I expected, with a slight southern drawl. Hello? This is Naomi Carter, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You texted me about Eric. What followed was a 30-minute conversation that shattered any remaining illusions I had about my marriage. Lisa Reynolds was 26, a graphic designer from Atlanta. She had met Eric 9 months ago through an online forum for gaming enthusiasts. Their relationship had evolved quickly, with Eric painting himself as an unhappily married man trapped by a controlling, financially irresponsible wife who refused to work and drained his resources. He told me you had gambling debts, Lisa said, her voice cracking. That you maxed out credit cards in his name, and he was working overtime just to keep your family afloat. I let out a hollow laugh. He was working overtime. All right, I muttered. Naomi, I swear, I had no idea, she continued. When he left you, I told him I was ready for us to move in together. That's when things started unraveling. He's been secretive, avoiding my questions about money. I finally went through his emails last night and saw the bank statements. That's when I realized he never planned to leave for me. He planned to leave for himself. A pit formed in my stomach. What do you mean? Lisa hesitated. There's a second apartment in his name. In Miami. My breath caught. Miami? He's been funneling money there for months. I think he's planning to disappear completely. I stared at the pile of bills in front of me, my hands shaking. Eric hadn't just abandoned us. He was running. And he had left me to clean up the mess. He said he had to take extra jobs to cover it. That you monitored his calls and emails, so we had to be careful about communication. Lisa's words made my stomach churn. I watched Ethan through the doorway as he concentrated on his math homework, completely unaware that his world was on the verge of crumbling. None of that is true, I whispered, gripping the phone tighter. I work. He controlled all our money. And now I'm discovering credit cards in my name that I never applied for. Lisa let out a heavy sigh. I'm so sorry, Naomi. I believed him completely until yesterday. I started noticing inconsistencies in his stories, and then I found his laptop open. I held my breath as she continued. There were emails, messages about transferring money from your joint accounts. When I confronted him, he got defensive. Eventually, he admitted let's just say he got creative with some details about your relationship. My hands were shaking by the time we finished talking. Lisa sent me screenshots of their conversations, including messages where Eric explicitly outlined his plan to leave me with the debt while starting fresh with her. He had systematically drained money from our modest savings account over the past 6 months. Worse, there were messages about blocking my access to friends and family, a strategy to ensure I'd have nowhere to turn once he left. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the damning evidence of Eric's calculated betrayal. The protective walls I had built around our little family weren't walls at all, they were a prison. And Eric had been the warden all along. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I dropped Ethan off at school, forcing a reassuring smile as he waved goodbye. He was the only good thing to come from my marriage, and I was determined to protect him from the worst of this situation. Back home, I went into survival mode. I printed Lisa's screenshots, gathered bank statements, made notes about Eric's controlling behavior over the years. If this was heading toward divorce, I needed evidence. But even as I organized everything, an overwhelming reality settled over me. I had no money for a lawyer. I had no family nearby to help. I had no friends left, thanks to years of Eric's subtle isolation tactics. By noon, drowning in panic, I grabbed my phone and called the one person who had tried to keep in touch, even when Eric disapproved, my former college roommate, Diane. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. The last time she visited, Eric claimed she had crossed a line by making inappropriate comments about our marriage. Looking back, I realized now that was just another excuse to cut me off from support. She picked up on the second ring. "Naomi?" Her voice was filled with surprise. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "No." And once I started talking, I couldn't stop. I told her everything: Eric's abandonment, the credit card debt, the revelations from Lisa. Diane listened in silence until I finally ran out of words. Then, she spoke with quiet fury. "That manipulative bastard." I exhaled shakily. "I don't know what to do, Diane." "Listen to me," she said firmly. "I'm coming over tonight. And I'm bringing help." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling you. Eric worked hard to cut you off, but he didn't succeed completely. You still have people who care about you." That evening, Diane arrived with another woman in tow, a tall, confident-looking brunette in a navy blazer. "Naomi, this is Catherine. She's a family law attorney." Panic surged through me. "I can't afford a lawyer." Catherine smiled gently. "Diane and I go way back. Consider this initial consultation a favor. We'll figure out the rest as we go." For the next 2 hours, Catherine reviewed everything: the bank statements, the credit card charges, Lisa's screenshots. She explained that while I might be liable for some of the credit card debt as Eric's spouse, there were legal options for contesting fraudulent charges. "We should file for an emergency hearing," she suggested. "We can try to freeze whatever assets he hasn't touched yet and petition for temporary support for Ethan." For the first time since Eric left, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as he had wanted me to believe. James's note had given me a flicker of hope. Maybe, with the right legal guidance, I could navigate this disaster without losing everything. That hope was short-lived. The next morning, an email from Eric appeared in my inbox. Subject: Financial Resolution. "Naomi, I've spoken with a lawyer. Since you were an authorized user on all accounts and benefited from the purchases, you are equally responsible for the debt. I've also documented your refusal to work full-time as evidence of your financial dependence. I'm willing to let you keep the house if you assume all outstanding debts. My lawyer will be in touch with formal papers. Eric." Panic clawed at my throat. Catherine had warned me this might happen, that Eric would try to offload the debt entirely onto me. Without a full-time income or any real assets, there was no way I could handle the mortgage and $45,000 in credit card debt. I forwarded the email to Catherine, who called within minutes. "This is a scare tactic," she assured me. "He's hoping you'll panic and agree to unfavorable terms. But we need to move quickly." That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at my computer, determined to gather more financial documentation. What I found sent ice through my veins. Eric hadn't just maxed out the credit cards. He had taken out a $30,000 home equity line of credit against our house. 3 months ago. The money was gone, withdrawn in small increments, just low enough to avoid triggering fraud alerts. Our home, the one thing I thought could provide stability for Ethan, was leveraged to the hilt. And worse? The first large payment on the equity line was due in 2 weeks. I covered my mouth, trying to hold back the sobs that threatened to break free. Mom, are you okay? I gasped, slamming my laptop shut and wiping my tears as fast as I could. Ethan stood in the doorway, dressed in his pajamas, concern written all over his face. Just some grown-up stuff, sweetie, I said, forcing a smile. You should be in bed. He stepped closer, his expression too serious for a 13-year-old. It's about Dad, isn't it? And money. I froze. What makes you think that? I heard you on the phone, he admitted. And I saw the bank papers on the table. Plus, Dad told me before he left that you might be sad for a while because of financial issues. He said it wasn't his fault. Anger flared in my chest at Eric's attempt to manipulate Ethan's understanding of his abandonment. I took a deep breath. Ethan, there's a lot happening right now. It's complicated. Your dad made some choices that put us in a tough spot, but I'm working on fixing it. Ethan sat beside me, his small hand covering mine. Don't cry, Mom. I'll help you. The quiet determination in his voice broke my heart and mended it at the same time. I kissed his forehead. That's very sweet, honey, but this isn't something you need to worry about. He frowned. But I already am worried, and I want to help. I sighed. Well, the best help would be just being patient while I figure things out. Maybe doing some extra chores around the house. Ethan nodded solemnly. I can do that. And more. After tucking him back into bed, I returned to the devastating financial mess in front of me. Between the credit cards, the home equity loan, and our daily expenses, we were sinking in quicksand. Catherine had been optimistic about contesting the fraudulent credit card applications, but the home equity loan was different. It had been taken against our joint property. And according to the bank's records, I had signed the paperwork. Except, I hadn't. Just like with the credit card applications, my signature had been forged. But proving that? That would take time and money, neither of which I had in abundance. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed, exhaustion weighing me down like lead. I had barely taken my first sip of coffee when my phone rang. Catherine. I answered immediately. Please tell me you have good news. She hesitated. I have news. Some good, some complicated. I sank into a chair. Lay it on me. I spoke with a forensic document analyst. If we can prove your signature was forged on the home equity loan, we may have a case for fraud. It won't be easy, but it's possible. I let out a slow breath. And the bad news? Eric withdrew the money in cash. Tracking it will be difficult. But we have one advantage. What's that? He thinks you're weak. I blinked. Excuse me? Catherine's voice hardened. Eric is betting that you'll fold. That you'll panic and take on all the debt just to be done with him. But you're not weak, Naomi. And we're going to prove it. I straightened in my chair, a fire sparking in my chest. Maybe Eric thought he had won. Maybe he thought he had buried me under a mountain of debt and lies. But he was wrong. Because for the first time in years, I was fighting back. The next morning brought another shock. When I tried to make a call, my phone displayed no service. Confused, I logged into our cellular account using my laptop. My stomach dropped. Eric had terminated my phone line. Panic surged as I grabbed Diane's phone and called the provider. The representative's response made my blood boil. Your husband removed you from the family plan, stating that you're separated and have agreed to obtain your own service. It was a calculated move, cutting off my communication while maintaining his carefully crafted narrative that I was financially irresponsible. Without a phone, I wouldn't be able to communicate with Catherine, potential employers, or even Ethan's school in an emergency. Diane didn't hesitate. I'm adding you to my plan. Temporary solution until we sort this out. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you. But Eric's message was crystal clear. He was systematically dismantling the infrastructure of our shared life, leaving me scrambling to rebuild while he moved on, unencumbered. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived at my doorstep. I ripped it open, already bracing for bad news. Inside were separation papers. Eric's offer was insulting. He was willing to let me keep the house, but only if I assumed all debts. He was offering $300 per month in child support, a pathetic amount given his six-figure salary. He claimed that my voluntary underemployment justified limiting additional financial support. The documents painted me as a financially dependent spouse who had refused full-time work, choosing instead to live beyond our means through reckless credit card spending. It was a complete inversion of reality. The reality where Eric had actively discouraged my career advancement, where he had controlled every aspect of our finances, where he had systematically trapped me into this situation. I gripped the papers so tightly my knuckles turned white. And for the first time since he left, my grief was replaced by something stronger. Determination. Eric had spent years constructing this trap, believing I'd have no resources to fight back. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. "We need to be strategic," Catherine said at our meeting the next day. "Eric has created a paper trail to support his narrative. We need evidence to counter it, proof of his financial control, your attempts to work more, and, most importantly, the forgeries." I spread my limited documentation across her desk. Bank statements showing Eric as the primary account holder, with me listed only as an authorized user. Emails where I had asked about our financial situation, only to receive vague responses. Texts where Eric had discouraged me from taking extra hours at work. "It's not much," I admitted. He was careful. Catherine gave me a reassuring look. "People like Eric always make mistakes. Their overconfidence leads to carelessness. We just need to find where he slipped up." For the next week, I threw myself into building my case. I requested security footage from the bank where the home equity loan had been processed, hoping to prove I hadn't been present for the signing. I contacted my employer about increasing my hours and documenting past calls from Eric questioning whether I was really needed when I had requested overtime. I reached out to Lisa, who agreed to provide a statement about Eric's misrepresentations and financial schemes. Meanwhile, Ethan had grown increasingly determined to help in his own way. He insisted on making his own lunches. He took over several household chores without being asked. And then, one Saturday morning, he set up a lemonade stand on our street corner. That afternoon, he walked into the house, a plastic container full of quarters clutched in his hands. $12, he announced proudly. "For the bills." I blinked back tears. "Honey, that's so sweet, but you don't need to worry about money." Ethan's face was serious. "I know, but I wanted to do something, while we wait for everyone else to help, too." I frowned. "Everyone else?" His eyes widened slightly, like he had said too much. Ethan," I pressed gently, "who else is helping?" He hesitated for a second before sighing. "I might have told Mr. Winters." Mr. Winters. Ethan's favorite teacher. The one who ran the school's community service club. A sense of unease and curiosity settled over me. "What exactly did you tell him?" Ethan shuffled his feet. "Just that things have been hard. That Dad left, and that you're trying to fix everything, but it's a lot." I swallowed hard. "And what did he say?" Ethan bit his lip. "He said to tell you that he has some ideas." I stared at my son, overwhelmed with emotions I couldn't quite name. I had spent so long believing I was completely alone in this. But maybe, just maybe, I wasn't. Ethan shrugged. "You know, like Miss Diane and the lawyer lady." Something about his response struck me as odd, but I was too overwhelmed with immediate concerns to pursue it. Those concerns multiplied when I checked our mailbox the next day and found a notice from the mortgage company. Despite the home equity loan being less than 3 months old, a payment had been missed. I called immediately, my heart pounding. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the representative said. "But Mr. Carter recently updated the account contact information. All statements and alerts have been going to his new address and phone number. Eric had locked me out of our own mortgage." "What can you tell me?" I asked, barely holding my frustration in check. "Only that your loan is now 30 days delinquent on both the mortgage and the equity line." I hung up, feeling like the ground had been pulled from under me. That evening, Catherine called with mixed news. "The bank footage doesn't show you present for the equity loan signing," she said. "That supports our forgery claim." Relief flooded me, until she continued. "However, the loan documents have a notary seal, which complicates things." I frowned. "How is that possible if I wasn't there?" Catherine hesitated. "Either the notary failed to properly verify identity or—" I swallowed hard, finishing the thought. Or Eric found someone to impersonate me. Catherine's voice was grim. People in the midst of deception rarely recognize boundaries. We'll subpoena the notary and find out. Just as we were wrapping up the call, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a sheriff's deputy holding a certified letter. Miss Carter. I nodded, my hands unsteady as I took the envelope. This is a notice of foreclosure proceedings, he said. My stomach dropped. But that can't be right, I protested, scanning the document with growing horror. We're only 1 month behind. The deputy pointed to a paragraph buried in the fine print. The bank is citing a violation of loan terms, something about material misrepresentation on the equity line application. I barely registered the deputy leaving as my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown number. Thought you were clever, getting your girlfriend to contact my wife. Back off or I'll make sure you and Ethan end up on the street by month's end. I froze. Eric had discovered my communication with Lisa, and now he was escalating. But he had made a critical mistake. He had explicitly threatened our child, in writing. And that, I realized with sudden clarity, might be exactly the mistake Catherine had predicted. 3 months after Eric walked out, my phone rang. I recognized the number instantly. Eric. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Hello? Naomi, we need to talk, he said without preamble. His voice was tense. Things have gotten out of hand. I stepped onto the front porch, signaling Ethan to stay inside and continue his homework. I'm listening. The bank is investigating the equity loan for fraud. My accounts are frozen. What did you do? Despite myself, I smiled. I didn't do anything, Eric. You did this. His tone sharpened. Cut the innocent act. You've been trying to ruin me. Lisa left because of your lies. The bank is talking about pressing charges. I need you to tell them this was a misunderstanding. I let his words hang in the air before responding. A misunderstanding? Like forging my signature? Impersonating me to a notary? Maxing out fraudulent credit cards in my name? Each question was delivered evenly, without the emotional tremor that would have been present just weeks before. Eric's tone shifted, from accusatory to pleading. Look, I made some bad decisions. I was stressed about money about us. But I can't have fraud charges on my record. I'll lose my job, everything. I exhaled slowly. That's unfortunate. For God's sake, Naomi, what do you want from me? I considered his question for a long moment. Then, for the first time since this nightmare began, I told him the truth. Nothing anymore. Silence. Then, cautiously, then why did you answer my call? I glanced back at the house, at Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, completely unaware of how much his life was about to change. Because I think you should come by tonight. There are some people you need to meet. Suspicion crept into his voice. What people? Is this some kind of trap? Not a trap, Eric. I let my voice soften, just enough to make him doubt himself. An education. I ended the call before he could respond. When I stepped back inside, Ethan was watching me through the window, his expression cautious. When our eyes met, he grinned and gave me a thumbs up. I laughed, shaking my head as I walked over to him. Before I could say anything, he wrapped his arms around me. You got this, Mom. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Ethan's arms wrapped around my waist. Was that Dad? He asked. Is he coming tonight to meet everyone? I hesitated for only a moment before answering. Yes. Finally, I understood his earlier cryptic comments. I pulled back slightly, searching his face. Ethan, what exactly have you been up to these past few weeks? A grin spread across his face, a grin that suddenly and powerfully reminded me of my mother's determined expression when she was facing a challenge. I've been building our community circle, he said proudly. Just like Mr. Winters taught us. At precisely 7 p.m., Eric arrived at my front door. His expression was wary as he stepped inside. And then he froze. He was clearly unprepared for the scene before him. Our modest living room was filled with people, some familiar, others I had only recently met. Diane sat beside Catherine on the sofa, their expressions unreadable. My supervisor from the law firm stood near the fireplace, chatting with 2 paralegals I worked with. Ethan's teacher, Mr. Winters, was arranging refreshments on the dining table, assisted by 3 parents from the school. My elderly neighbor, Mr. Patel, sat comfortably in an armchair while his wife handed out coffee cups. Even Lisa was there, having flown in from Atlanta specifically for this moment. Eric's gaze darted from face to face, recognition dawning as he realized these weren't just random supporters. They were witnesses. Witnesses to his deceptions. Contributors to my recovery. His voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "What is this?" Ethan stepped forward, a neatly folded piece of paper in his hands. "It's our community circle, Dad." Eric's brow furrowed. "You're what?" Ethan unfolded the paper and handed it to him. On it was a meticulously drawn map of connections, with Ethan and me at the center, radiating outward to dozens of names. Neighbors, teachers, parents of Ethan's friends, my coworkers, even distant family members. "When you left," Ethan explained, his voice calm but firm, "I knew Mom would need help. So I made a list of everyone who might care about us." Eric's grip on the paper tightened as he scanned the names. "You discouraged Mom from contacting her friends. You tried to isolate her," Ethan continued, his voice unwavering. "But you forgot about my friends, and their parents, and my teachers, and our neighbors." The realization hit Eric like a wave. This wasn't just a room full of people. This was a carefully built network, a safety net he had systematically tried to dismantle. Diane had helped me secure a full-time position with benefits at another law firm. Catherine had worked pro bono to document the fraud and negotiate with creditors. Mr. Winters had organized a support network of school families who provided meals, childcare, and emotional support. Mr. Patel, a retired accountant, had been helping me rebuild my credit and create a sustainable budget. And Lisa, the woman he had used and discarded, had willingly provided damning testimony that would help me fight back legally. Together, they had become my foundation. And now, they stood before him, unshakable. I took a step forward, my voice quiet but steady. "You thought I had no one." Eric's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "You were wrong." For the first time since he left, Eric looked truly speechless. Ethan took my hand, his small fingers squeezing mine. "See, Mom," he whispered. "I told you I would help." Tears burned my eyes, but they weren't from sadness. Through my son's wisdom and courage, I had rediscovered not just resources I didn't know I had, but strength I had forgotten existed within me. The community circle continued to gather around us, a living testament to the truth that relationship wealth will always be more valuable than financial wealth. And as I watched Eric retreat, diminished by the realization of what he had truly lost, I felt no triumph. Only gratitude. For my remarkable son. For the people who had stepped up when I thought I had no one. For the opportunity to begin again, surrounded by those who truly cared. And this time, I wasn't rebuilding alone. If you've made it this far, you've walked with me through betrayal, heartbreak, and survival. You've seen what it means to be abandoned, manipulated, and left with nothing, but you've also witnessed the power of resilience, community, and fighting back. Now, I turn to you. I want to hear from you. What would you say to someone like me, someone who was blindsided, who had to start over from scratch? Would you encourage me? Would you remind me that I am not alone? Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you would do in my shoes. Because the truth is, someone out there is living this story right now. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone you love. And they need to hear the words you have to say. But don't stop there. Take a moment and think about your own life. Who is in your circle? Have you surrounded yourself with people who would show up if everything fell apart? Or have you, like me, been isolated by someone who wanted to keep you powerless? If you've ever ignored the warning signs, if you've ever made yourself smaller to keep the peace, please learn from my mistakes. You do not have to wait until everything is taken from you to reclaim your life. So, let's make this a conversation. Drop a comment. Share your own experiences. Offer advice to someone who might need it. And most importantly, never let anyone convince you that you are alone. Because when we stand together, we rebuild stronger than ever.